Welcome to the Unfinished podcast. Truth be told, we've never really learned how to deal with our unfinished business. In a society that's taught us to be put together, what do we do when our world falls apart? Most importantly, why does our world fall apart? See, right now we're living through the most significant transformation humanity has ever known. Knowing how to pick up our pens and write a renewed story has never been a more important conversation. So welcome to the podcast that interviews heroes that at some point had to start again and rise to glory.
Cole Gibson.
One of Australia's top 100 most influential women.
Love is always there.
The more love you give, the more you get it back.
We're all connected.
And that's unification.
We're live.
It's already begun.
Yeah.
Be prepared for a lot of weird giggles, everyone watching.
Everyone, I cannot actually express how excited I am to have convinced Emeli Paulo to come out of hiatus, hibernation.
A sabbatical, a break, time out.
It's so great. And Em and I go way back, like when I was living in Melbourne back, which was 2014. Yeah, 2014.
Wow, was it? Okay, yep.
Yeah, and we actually haven't had a proper drop-in since before the world went into a global pandemic. So
Global pandemic. A
Yeah.
lot changes when you haven't spoken to a good old friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Pandemic.
And so this is the best thing about running a podcast, actually, is you can do a deep dive off the cuff after not really having a drop-in for 2 years.
I actually said for the viewers, let's catch up. And now I'm doing a podcast instead of catching up, which I think is hilarious.
We did have some. We had some time. I was like, let's have a drop.
warmed up.
I feel like that would have been a good 30-minute addition to the podcast. Actually, that whole conversation. I'm not really into doing any kind of formal, like I personally cringe when people read out my bio. So I prefer.
I don't even have one at the moment, so that's even better.
Perfect. Yeah, these guys to just get to know you as we go through this conversation.
All right.
Yeah, go.
You say that I was just laughing when you said the podcast is about unfinished.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I feel. So if anyone's watching this, I am unfinished right now. Maybe I'm like 80% unfinished, and depending on the time of the day, I'm 60. But 6 months ago, I wouldn't even have said I was 20 or 30. That's how much has changed. So that's why I was like, you know what? I can come back on and do this with you.
At 80%, that's like an appropriate amount of unfinished to start talking about what's unfinished.
Well, I don't think I would have done this if I was at 40 or 20.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. But this is exactly why this conversation is important. And, for the viewers' context, for those who are live with us or those who are listening later on, really, like, the intent of these conversations is to help people understand that life isn't always going to feel finished. And what do you do when things feel unresolved, when things feel like beyond your control to actually resolve? Like, how do you cope with that? And most importantly, like, how do you find joy in life anyway? How do you like come back to yourself and build that relationship with yourself again, when maybe parts of your identity that you were so attached to just all of a sudden is not there anymore? What do you do? And I think that this is like, in a way, Em and I both have a shared background of Em's an amazing facilitator of the hero's journey, and myself as rite of passage, which are very similar models. And there's this part of those journeys, which is this, like, in rite of passage, they call it the liminal space, right? The liminal space, the cocoon, where you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in this state of unfinished. But I know myself, I almost got to a place in my facilitation where I was so used to like facilitating the process of others being in this state of liminality that I didn't realize how desensitized I had become to my own attachment to identity as a transformational facilitator, but not necessarily really going to those like depths and having my identity ripped apart and feeling unfinished in my own life. And I think this would be a really powerful place to sort of begin in you sharing some of what you've been journeying over the past couple of years. Like, how has it felt to be on the flip side of what you so brilliantly facilitate in other people?
Oh, it was such a big wake-up call. And, you know, as much as I've been joking offline about not wanting to do this, of course I'm up for it. As soon as I knew it was you, I was like, yeah, that could be really interesting. And it really has been a shock to the system. I'm someone since the age of 17 got put in a youth organisation that wasn't just like one of those, like, you know, look after the poor kid and the black kid and or whatever she is, half Islander, half whitey, you know, and make their dreams come true. Like, this organisation did self-development, professional development, and we would workshop ourselves, our identities, who we are, our fears and our blocks. Like, I've been doing the work, whatever that looks like to people, for 17. So I think it's really funny that I hit a point in my life and said, I'm not doing any more work on myself. I'm not running work for anyone else. Like, you know, numbers become a big thing, part of your identity. You know, you're like, I've worked with 1 million people. I've run 15,000 workshops. I've done 2,000, 3,000 coaching clients. I've made X amount of money. I've run 10, you know, like, I was all about what am I going to do? And so, yeah, it's really shocking to me to just be like, I actually stopped and said no more.
Yeah. I want to know what you've like, and there's so much to unpack in that, but like, as you drew that line and you actually started to come back to yourself, the part of you that, you know, is you beneath those identities, what has the key aspects of yourself been that you've gotten to know or even discovered for the first time since making that decision?
I'm sad. And I was in a lot of pain, and there are a lot of things in my life that I hadn't dealt with, or I thought that if you do a few courses on it, or maybe go see a psychologist, then that's the work. And if you're constantly achieving something that maybe equals your pain, then that's what I found, is that it's good for me to just say, I am sad. I've been sad. And that's where I'm at right now. Like, oh, can I truly accept people watching this and seeing me as someone who's sad? Like, there's deep sadness in me that I just didn't ever have time to do, because I was a social entrepreneur and a life coach. And I think even when you start to do this work for yourself, but if you're then a practitioner of it, there comes a time where you have to do the work on yourself to keep doing it. Or maybe because you're doing the work, then the work fucking owns you as well. Like, you have to then process things that you never thought were there. And that's that multi-level consciousness, the subconscious. So, yeah, does that make sense? Like, I've found that got a lot of pain and sadness in me.
Yeah, I call it the law of demonstration. If you're going to go out into the world and
the phrase.
Yeah, like that's how I see it. It's like, which is actually it's talked about as one of the spiritual laws. The universe will ask you to demonstrate what you claim. So,
and here's my thing with it, is that everyone in the mainstream world might hear the law of demonstration as, you've got depression, you've got anxiety, you're burnt out, and all of these symptoms that are sort of spoken about in mainstream world. But I love the law of demonstration, is because when that stuff came up for me, I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, I couldn't physically move, and I couldn't function in my brain. I could barely connect with people. It was like a complete shutdown. And there are many very, like there's things that just make sense of why that occurred. But I also think that one of the bravest things I did was say to myself, you need to stop now. Like the law of demonstration is that you have to feel how sad you are and how emotionally disconnected you are. And no one gives you a handbook, right, on how do you stop and sit with it.
Trying this podcast. This is what we need to get to.
Just sit with it. But I spent 2 years, 1 full year. Let me do the fingers again. 1, 2. I'm just sitting with it. And it's the bravest thing I could have ever done. And it sounds very esoteric, but I tell you what, it wasn't. It was painful, man.
We need to go into the sandbox because so many people it's actually inevitable. Like life, you're not going to go through life having every single chapter perfect, like every breakup perfect, amicable, understanding, every time that a business fails or, a brand fucks up or whatever. It's just never going to be that way. And yet, as a society, we're so deeply programmed to feel shame. And I mean, it's not a new conversation, but I just don't think people are having the conversation well.
Well, let's see if we can have it well. What does it look like? Is it you asking me questions or is it me asking you? Just go with the right.
No, I want to know what it was actually like, so that I can relate. And there's something.
I need to continue. Yeah.
That I think would be amazing to touch on as well, because I think you really hit it. I'm going to slow this down because I think this is something that people should really pay attention to in their own psyche. I know it's there for me.
Oh, I'm ready to learn. Let's do this.
We're ready to go. Ready to get into the sandbox and just rip into everything that's unfinished and share. Yeah, we're going to do it, guys. I'm excited for the liberation that actually comes with being honest about these things.
Oh yeah, I got liberated. That's why I'm at 80%, because I am liberated. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, it is. It's the only way actually to freedom. When your back's up against a wall and you actually say, okay, I cannot run from the truth. I cannot run from I'm not going to try and run from the truth anymore. I'm broken. I'm in a ball. I'm in a fetal position. I'm actually going to face it. And I'm going to have moments where I feel like I'm not going to survive. I've fucking been there over the past year and a half.
Of course. 100%.
So much was unfinished in my own job. I'm probably still at 40%, not able to fully talk yet. That's why I want to do this interview series of I need to get myself to 80% so that I can share the journey more. But that's a part of the process, and we need to normalize it, because the feelings of failure and shame and I don't want to be seen in this, I'm not going to, I'm going to cover up and pretend like things aren't as bad as they are. All of it is so damaging, because entropy, the breakdown, is as important as the breakthrough and the rise and the climb, because it deepens. And maybe this is what we should sort of touch on as well. The way that this defines our character, or as I like to see it, it gives us an opportunity to actually shape our character, because the choices you make in the face of truth, that's where you're really showing yourself who you are. Not the person, I'm not the person that's getting a standing ovation on stage, more than I'm the person that the choices I make, that's defined by the choices I make when things are going completely terribly and my back is up against the wall. Who am I in those moments? That's what we need to actually start asking ourselves and not running away from, because it's even more important, I think, than when you're thriving, in life. But your words before were, I felt I had to achieve to the same level as I was sad.
It's such a fun one that I'm just I'm going to write a book on that.
You should.
How many of us are doing it?
Where does that come from? Let's start there. Where does that come from? Why?
There's two things I could talk about here. And it's I don't want to break it down too much, but I do think that loving and understanding what trauma is so important. And, you know, really breaking down the medical terms of PTSD and CPTSD and whatever it is, like, to me, really highlighted to me that I've been in one of, or maybe all of them, the trigger responses like fight, flight, freeze, appease, disassociate. And, you know, I really encourage people not to be scared of these trigger responses, but to really look into that. And, you know, some people take, let's say, fight. You know, we're Polynesians in my family. We actually fight a lot. But I can recognize through my brothers who, you know, have their triggers and are really like, they froth at the fucking mouth when they're angry. They're in trigger mode. Like, our childhood trauma that's how they respond. That's how they cope with it, through anger. Then the other part of it is like, you know, flight. Man, I haven't stopped. I don't even know what stop means. Flying here, doing a project over here, not having a steady home. I was constantly in flight. You know, when it comes to relationships, you know, men or whoever would fall in love with me, and I'd be like, before you know it, I'm out the fucking door, you know, and I deserve that love, but I'd be like, what the fuck just happened there? You know, freeze, like, quite often that sort of talk to that part too, that, you know, I'd meet certain people and I'd freeze up. But they're the common ones you hear about, right? But then I started to discover like appease being that I would just say yes and nod my head to people even though I disagree, or
fear of confrontation.
And then there's dissociate, and, you know, that's where I worked a lot, and I would just switch off and work more if anything came up for me, or, you know, I used to love my drugs and alcohol, and that's how I also would escape the stuff. And you're not conscious to what you're running from or what's sitting there, right?
And it's validated by those around you. I think that that's really important for people to understand, is like,
what do you mean?
Well, it's not, when I put it this way, and I'm writing about this in my next book, actually, that we will enable in another what we're not yet willing to confront in ourselves. So if you are, you know, if you're at a place where you're seeking that like refuge in that direction, and you actually need like a higher point of wisdom, there's very little chance that looking to the people around you is going to provide a pathway to ascend. Like, you know, I mean, it's a big conversation, but I think as a society, morally, we're so far from what's right, you know, and actually, like, I think in the personal development movement, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, I think this like idea that everything is subjective, you know, like, just think positively and it's all good, and there's no right and wrong. I actually think in moments of trauma, that's actually very damaging perspective, to say that there's no right action when actually there is a right action. There is definitely a right action and a wrong action when you're running from what actually needs to be resolved in yourself. And I actually don't hear many leaders like speak from that strength of, you know, this is the right thing to do. Let's look at your integrity. Let's put you on a path that's going to probably be painful, that people are going to reject, but it's going to ultimately send you in the right direction. How many people talk about that?
Well, they don't, which is why I'm loving this convo. And I try my best to talk to people, because even though I'm talking about the trauma that came up, I don't want any of the people that I may know watching this think that I didn't love what I was doing. You know, it was really beautiful, the community and the connection and the lives that we shifted and transformed and evolved together. But I also think what you're sort of alluding to is people enabled it, because I was high functioning. Like, let's look at it. I got to meet Oprah, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, run a workshop for Russell Brand. You know, and like, I just kept getting all of these, like, what the society says is awesome and cool. But I was so tired. I'd stand in front of 400 people. I'd put together something in half an hour called Real Fest, where we could really connect and be real, but I could barely stand on stage. And I sat to my team earlier that day and said, guys, something not right here. I can't do another one. And they were like, we're doing another one. They didn't mean it. I've even had discussions with my old team about that. And they're like, we just didn't even understand that you were so burnt out and tired. But what was sitting underneath that is, you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm as shocked as most people that I stopped because of trauma. But if this was like the demonstration, the law of demonstration, I had to really stop and go, what is this? What is this? What if you did nothing?
The glorification of success and achievement.
And the glorification of busy. Anyone who's out there and you're busy, you need to check yourself, because whoever's enabling your busyness doesn't realize that you need some time to be with yourself. And if you can't sit with yourself, and that's the thing. Yeah. It wasn't as though I thought I couldn't sit with myself, but I couldn't. I was like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that, I've got $1 million going out this way, we've got, another 100,000 people over this side. And it looks like a great thing, but I really think it's important to be as honest and open as a leader, or not that I have any audience anymore. Like, do you know what it's like to live without an audience, Nicole? It's been a while for you.
It is. In a way, I feel like that I went through.
Yes, sorry, you're right. Yeah, this last year.
Yeah, and it's vulnerability to my listeners. I will share more and more over time. I think you can probably relate to this when you've been going through so much. Sometimes you just literally don't have the words. And for me, like expression and creativity and what I'm finding myself working on at the moment, it's not distraction. It really is like it's therapy, having these conversations about what it means to be unresolved and unfinished. I couldn't give a fuck about how many people are listening. Like, I've been so, like, in a way broken down by challenges. And actually, like, what was coming through as you were sharing in relation to what I've kind of realized, the revelations I've had, is I needed to get to a place where just any part of me that wanted to glorify the self just died. Like, it is so actually glorifying.
It's so funny how we went through a very similar thing and had no idea.
Yeah. Well,
because I wasn't on socials. I didn't even know what was going on. Like, so you're right. Wow.
The glorification of self actually, I think, is it's the source of all suffering, actually. And the more that I've glorified God and those around me and and it's not that I wasn't doing this, but I had to learn it on a whole other level.
Yeah, it's like I feel the same. It wasn't like I wasn't doing it. It's just a whole other grounded dimension of now we're really going to learn what it is.
Totally. And there have been moments like in my journey where I've had to say for me, it's God. Like, I don't know how to get through this on my own. I need guidance. I need support. Mm-hmm. And as I share that actually with people are triggered by it. And my question to anyone listening that maybe feels that way when they hear those words, that actually we are not, if the self could get through adversity and improve itself, then it would already be improved. We actually need the support of something greater, a greater perspective, a greater God, whatever, like something to put your faith and your trust in. You need that to expand and to grow. And I think the reason that people get so triggered, I've received messages over the past 24 hours, like, why are you all of a sudden speaking about God? I've actually always spoken about God, just to set the record straight, but at another level, because in my journey, I feel that is for me to take the credit of what actually isn't mine to take credit for is not in integrity to the truth, and I think the more we focus on taking credit where credit actually isn't due, that it was because of someone else we got that break, that it was because of a faith that got us through a difficult time. We should have the humility actually and the reverence to give credit where credit is due and to not be ashamed. And there is shame. There is shame when it comes to giving someone else the credit.
That's, yeah, like when I say sad, you know, slide in shame underneath that.
Let's go.
I think, well, like, you know, just on that, the only way I got through this, and that I call it the dark night of the soul, before the darkness, was my family. Like, I have a wonderful, beautiful family, but it's very difficult. My parents died when we were younger. There's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, and everyone's separated, come back together, and we love each other dearly. But I had to go back and live with my sister and her family, and literally it was I had to, because I couldn't function on my own. And you know, you talk about God, but the relationship with something else other than the self, I had to depend on them, and they looked after me. And I could talk all day about the power of connection and social connection. And with this mental health world that we live in, do we have mental health and then we disconnect from our community or our family or our friends? Or is it that we disconnected from our family and friends, and so therefore we have mental health issues? Like, which one's first? The medical world talks more about once you have mental health issues, then you lose your community or connection to community and you can't reach out. But I wonder, through going through this process now of, I could not have healed or resolved this without connection, without my sister. And that's a godliness in itself, that love and connection.
Love. To favor.
When you say God, I hear that in you. I know what you're talking about. I believe in the greater consciousness, and I do have faith in it. And it's also in the little moments and the community. And
I think that is the ultimate expression. It's to look beyond the self and stop concerning ourselves with, oh, what is the damage to my brand and my reputation, and you know, and like actually be like, who is around? How can I favor those around me? How can I put others first? You know, how can I love those people that are actually my source of strength? I interviewed the first guest on this podcast, Renee. She was talking about trail angels, those people that, you know, just
trail angels.
Yeah, they come, and it's, I think, you know, if we really want to build a new world, not just overcome our own adversity, this is the perspective shift that is so fundamental, focusing on what can I give instead of what can I get. You know, how can I bring joy and happiness and love to those around me and focus less on, you know, and as a result of that, you expand, you become a bigger, better person.
And with this busyness and the glorification of it, you know, if you look through all the people who are so busy, you know, you got to ask yourself, like I look at them now and go, what trauma have you not resolved? You know, like the business world. And I watch people, like, even during the COVID times, get on meetings with me. I'm like, and I see myself in them now and go, you know, are you that healthy? And yeah, it just interests me from that place of seeing people through the filter of trauma, which is, you know, a psychological integrated approach. But I think it's a really intellectually important to learn. But just because you read about it doesn't mean that you're going to resolve your trauma. Like, you got to do the work.
Yeah, that's right. And I think sometimes intelligence and intellect can be a curse, actually, because you think you understand it, but you're not actually, like, you're intellectualizing it. You're not going there. And actually, that's what I would like to dive into next. Is you did have awareness of all of these things intellectually, but when you were actually faced with it, I want to know, like, what were the moments that you were confronted with? What was the next little source of strength or faith that you had to hold on to get you to the next part of your process?
I feel responsible to say trigger warning for people who have, you know, see themselves in me. So don't forget to do your mindfulness after this, have a bath, relax your body. But I feel like the biggest moment was all memories of being sexually abused as a child came up, Nicole. And I kind of knew of one male who did this to me, and I did a lot of work on it. But I was so burnt out, and there was a reflection in a project that I was running that I felt like one person betrayed me. And I put my words to this now, but I didn't see it at the time. Like, was sending me emails and really aggressive. And then people around them, they really turned a lot of people who I admired and loved against me. And because I was so burnt out and tired, like I appeased it, and I sort of flight by running away. And in this trigger point, I had to genuinely say to myself, what is this truly about? And whatever the betrayal in my physical world of my project reflected what I hadn't addressed. And over this year of feeling so burnt out, memories started to come back, and really graphic. And if you know anything about trauma or child sexual abuse, like they were flashbacks. And, there were moments where I was like getting the memory like I was back a child. And then it was multiple memories of multiple men. And can you imagine, as a 40-year-old, remembering now and feeling it from when you were 4 all the way to your 14? Now, this is big stuff to say, but we don't talk about this enough. And I just want to be somebody who says it's okay to talk about it. Like, it was a deep level of shame for me that my beautiful little girl and body decided we're going to pack that away. And we're not going to think about it until later. And that's that was the bigness for me, to be like, wow, I had no idea this was sitting in me. The shame, the
Did
abuse.
you have any like kind of symptoms that you now realize actually that's what, because I think that there would definitely be some people that relate deeply to this. And sometimes when we have these traumas, we do have symptoms in our lives. We just don't understand where they're coming.
I had one memory of one of the males that was really close to me, and I put it aside and then decided to run a multi-leveled project instead of assessing it. And I can almost see that just before that project fell apart, that was a telltale sign that you think that, oh, this is coming up for me now. Well, I've done it before, so we don't need to do it fully again. And even people were telling me that, well, you've been able to deal with it in the past from the first memories. You'll do it again. And so I think that was the telltale sign. That was sort of that came up. I couldn't, my body, I've put on quite a bit of weight, but my body went into like protection mode, and then it just started storing whatever it needed to store to protect me. So I thought that maybe that was something I missed a cue. But the thing about it, like I even can feel the trigger of the coming on in me now. Like I start to slow down. It's hard to speak my words so eloquently like I think, like I can feel the triggers starting to occur. So, yeah, to answer, I don't know if that's answering any question, but it was shameful. And I thought, fuck, I've just got to slow down and witness all of this.
That's right.
So I went to a therapist and observed it, and what started to come up, which is really kind of weirdly cool, is I got so angry. Like people would piss me off. I wouldn't go see my friends. I didn't want to talk to them. My family would ask me to do something. I'd be like, and then I just started to get fury. Now, most women don't accept their fury anyway. And in the Polynesian community, everyone tells you, you always say you're too angry, calm down, Polly's gone crazy. So I kind of had this story that you shouldn't be angry. And so for like 6 to 8 months, I was like, I was on fire, just with fury and saying to people, not appeasing anything anymore. I won't take that. I can see how I let people take advantage of me. Even the reason why my project didn't move forwards because I didn't speak up for myself. And I think they're signs that I was missing of appeasing people, saying it's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry, move over here. Like, that's a very subtle one, but if you can get appeasing, I reckon they were big telltale signs. So yeah, the anger one it's kind of funny to look back on now because you don't see that in me. Like, maybe it's a default, I don't know. But I feel like I said to my therapist when I first went in there, I couldn't even talk, and I would sit and I said, I can't, and this would happen to me. And so we'd literally sit in sessions without saying anything. Now, if you do me, that's just weird. And I think, yeah. And I'd just be like, I don't know what all of this is, what's happened to me, my identity, like the business is gone, my community's gone. I'm an inspirational speaker. I get paid a lot of money to function in the world and inspire others, and I can't do this anymore. What is wrong with me? But I loved what she said to me is, it's just going to take time for you to trust yourself. And, you know, if you learn about the amygdala had triggered in me, like I was in pure, you know, our brain that I just, it would shrink everything. And I, you know, like I'm even doing it now. Like I couldn't speak a lot of the time.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is so important for people to hear and reflect. I really hope everyone's maybe reflecting on, you know, their own symptoms that, as you said before, you just needed to slow down and witness them. I think that that's a really powerful statement. And like, I'd like to explore that a little bit more. Like, what does it actually mean? Because I relate. I think the most confronting parts of my own shame, I just was in so much defense and deflection. I didn't realize that I had shame. It was just like, if anyone that loved me would even get close to it, it was like, no, you're wrong. And actually, like, what happens, I think, the more you have social credibility, you use it, you know, to sort of like, oh, you see something that's in me, look what I've created. Like,
I can see the laughter because that is the truth.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And this is not just like people that are working in this space. I think it's anyone that's like ambitious, actually. And not that ambition's wrong, but where does the drive come from? What are you driven by?
That's what I mean. That's why I look at some people and go, there's some stuff there that isn't resolved for you, man. And you need, I just want to say it to you because no one else is. And in fact, only great friends recently have maybe tapped into it. And I've said to them, look, this isn't about your work. This is about you having to heal some childhood
your soul,
trauma.
Man. Yes, let's talk about your soul.
Yeah, don't do more work. No. Let me tell you what happens if you do more work. And then they're like, oh.
Yeah. Let's go for drinks. Really, though, this is so important. And there's a couple of things I really want people to hear and listen to in this. The first is to reflect on yourself. And I think, you know, actually the lesson that we're all trying to be initiated into right now by the greater powers is a deep reflection. But are people actually reflect? Are you sitting on the couch watching Netflix, you know?
Yeah, like who tells you? You have to train yourself to figure out how you listen. That was a big thing. Like I trained myself how I listen over the last year.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I really want people to take away from what we're talking about is sometimes we really need to, how do I want to say this? In Buddhism, they'll say if you see something, you have a responsibility for it. And, you know, what do you see in those around you? Like, I'm sure through my journey and through your journey, we've had people in our lives that could see, you know, and they just didn't want to go there. And actually, going back to my journey through an eating disorder, people knew. It's not that It's not that people didn't know. They were just so shit scared. And I think the mechanism that comes up in people is, I don't know what to say. I don't, I'm not the right person to have this conversation. But what I want you guys to realize is when we do that, we make it about ourselves. And actually, it's not about you. It's not about your discomfort. It's not about you finding the perfect thing to say. It's about you leaning into those around you and actually being like, I care about you more than I care about what you're doing, more than I care about, what you can do for me, more than I care about how uncomfortable this is for me to talk about. And how many real relationships, honestly, guys, how many real relationships do you have in your life of if everything came crashing down, you really would feel safe and feel no shame and actually feel no different to call on those people? How many people do we have in our lives that it's unconditional like that?
Something I noticed in this period of like disassociating and pulling myself out, which again, you hear all the time in the anxiety-induced world we live in, I noticed that initially I started to be upset with others for not checking in with me. Like, no one calls me. No one's checking in with me. That's all I did for you fuckers this whole time. And I laugh at myself through that frustration back then. But I recognize too that, friendships and connections, you have to put effort in, and to me, I even wrote a list.
Let's define effort, because a lot of people are saying, like, I see my friends all the time, we do this together. Let's define, like, if you were to give a handbook, what does it mean?
The joke is that even though I was going through this dark night of the soul, I couldn't stop my passion for breaking things down and to make sure I teach others. And I wrote spreadsheets of how I was doing things and journaling them like a habit tracker. But that's like, you just also need that momentum too as a coach. I'm like, this might help somewhere.
For me,
yeah. Like for me, it was a combination of thinking. I had to sit down and say to myself, who are the people that mean something to me, that I want to keep in my life, versus the ones that aren't, that are toxic. And I had to really define what that is. And I also even saw it as like different levels of circles. If I don't have to get rid of people. I just know who's in the inner circle and who's in the out. And that's helpful for me.
That's why you didn't speak to me for 2 years. I'm kidding. I got thrown into.
Don't you worry. There was a point that I was like, fuck, that bitch didn't even fucking check in with me.
That's true. I did.
Of course you did, but that's what happens when you're triggered. Like, you just start hating on people.
Yeah, I guess.
It's not made you uncomfortable. That's not true. See, that's live. That's honest. But it's not true, because that's what started to occur, and even why we're still having this conversation and connected, is that if you don't make effort, like, hey, man, how are you? Do you want to check in? And not, how are you? What's been a highlight? Like, let's actually check in with the intention, myself, behind it. Like, I want to have a check-in, and who's going to come back to you. The second part is I thought that when you see people, you have to sit down and ask them what's been hard for you lately during this thing. And they might not give it to you initially, but it's so simple that next time you got to do it again. And even the second thing is, you don't always have to talk about it with everyone, don't you think? I think with my family, they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. But I can go sit by a fire with them.
Yeah, have awareness of what someone might need. That's how I see it. It's not always words. Like, if you can see someone's struggling or whatever, like, consciously have the emotional intelligence to be like, they need to have a laugh. I'm gonna, send them a joke, or like, take it. I think that's the effort. It's not needing to be told constantly of like, hey,
go sit, go walk with them. Like, this is the stuff that it's about, building trust. If you feel like you've lost it, or you feel like you want to improve on it or build it, make it stronger, that trust level in there, like, that's that psychological safe place that you're creating where you can challenge each other, right? But you can also be really creative together. Like, that's just as vulnerable as sharing how you feel. And I think the effort of going to do things that that person loves is important, or sharing in that with them is just as important as
generosity
as
of spirit. Like, yes, I love this generosity. Be generous with your spirit when it comes to the people in your life, and actually, you know, think, I might not like this thing, but they love it, and so I'm just going to put myself aside for a period of time, and I'm going to like relish in what they love, and just generous in that, and don't make it about you, and don't, I think like this trade-off, we're conditioned for everything to be so transactional that like, if I can't find something that I love and you love, then we're not going to do it because that's unfair.
And if you piss me off because you've given me feedback and you've done it 4 times and I'm not ready, then you're a shit friend. Actually, no, they're trying to tell you something. You're like, listen, and that's where I think boundaries is a big part of it, that no one trains you in how to set a boundary, do they? It's like, mate, I love that you always want to give me feedback, but there's certain times where you can give it to me, and it's not when we're walking down the street amongst all these hot people and then I'm going to be feeling awkward. You know what I mean? Like, that's setting a boundary, saying in a certain time and place, or, hey, not right now, maybe later, or, hey, you know, like that the boundary thing is a big one, I reckon I learned, is just how much that self-betrayal with people.
Totally.
Is you get pissed off with people all the time because you've betrayed yourself. And that's what I started to get really angry about. I had such a big generosity of spirit that I was giving. And you don't know what you don't know. And I needed to give to myself for quite a while. But you get, again, that glorification. It gets pulled away, all your demands. And I think to mums, especially all my friends who are mums, I'm like, you're only upset right now with your husband or work, and this is a constant thing because you keep betraying yourself. And I want you to start putting boundaries. Your well-being, I want 5 things you tell me. As I was saying to my friend the other day, 5 things, Nicole, where you're doing every morning, whether it be meditation, all the standard shit that the gurus like to give you, but what do you love? I sit in an armchair now and then I fall asleep and I'm drooling on myself. And
that's what you love.
In the armchair, I'm laughing because it's my space, my chair, no one's around me, and it's me giving to myself. And I've been reading, not drooling, but reading. That anyway, that sort of stuff makes me
whatever makes you
up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going off on different tangents.
No, I love this. I think like turning the mirror back around. You know, that's if you're looking at the world being like, why is something like this, and I feel so angry at this person, guys, it's not easy to actually turn that mirror back around, look at yourself and say, where is this anger coming from? Where?
Yeah, and where? And that's why I really encourage people to look at this appeasing nature that we've been trained to have, a lot of people, or where you're just betraying and giving your time, your space, who you are to everyone else instead of giving it to yourself.
Amen.
Everyone says, I'm working hard at the moment to achieve. And I say, well, and my well-being is okay. And I say, well, you should be working hard at your well-being so that the work is easy. You know, like that's the difference there, don't you reckon? That when you are so much more connected and you do these habitual things, whether it be your friendships or, you know, go through your dark night of the soul or reflect, like a lot of the other external physical things become much easier when you really make this, and that includes the connection with others or God.
Yeah, it's alignment, I think, to what we're truly meant to be doing. And that's like, I really do believe that when you are aligned, you know, part of my process has been to actually look at, without defense, where is there suffering in my life, and to look at it through the frame of like, okay, if I'm in alignment to you know, God's will for me, my will, my purpose on the planet, would there really be, there would be trials and tribulations, but would there be great suffering? No, because you don't experience it as suffering. And it's hard to look at because we identify with the suffering. And this is, you know, whether it's like a relationship pattern, that's been a big thing in my life, like patterns in relationships where I was like, well, this is who I am, and not wanting to actually be like, no, like it doesn't need the suffering really is optional when you can be honest with what it is that's driving you towards these things, that is recreating this pattern over and over again, and seek to minimize that suffering through coming back into truth. And like, you'll even notice that when you're in truth, the shame around speaking the truth, there's no point fighting the truth or resisting the truth when you're really willing to like be honest with where you're at, and like brutally, in the rawest sort of way, honest with what's present for you. You feel, even if it hurts, you feel expanded, because the pathway is revealing. You're not resisting things, trying to hide and not face, what you're not running away anymore.
What was really interesting about this year off of not living life with an audience, like I feel like I've never not done that. And then to sort of give myself the bravery to sit with it all, and therapy and checking in with friends and really quiet. For some people, that's just the norm, so they find this conversation weird. But I found that this is the unfinished part, but it feels like a really interesting place to, is that even though I fall asleep drooling on myself in the armchair, there is a quietness that I've never experienced before in my life, sitting in that armchair.
Peace,
and it's peace, but you know what it is? It's natural that I have shame, and it's natural that I have guilt. And you could say it's a true acceptance, but I just feel like in our modern society, everyone's asking you to move over to be this evolved, acceptant being. But I just think that the sort of shadow world, the hero's journey, the light and dark, God and the devil, like these two components that I'm probably oversimplifying, it's very natural to have them both. So when I sit in the chair and I'm joyous that I'm going to talk to my friend Nicole later, I'm actually also still feeling that shame of, should I speak about the sexual abuse and what will come out of this? And I don't know, I think that's just a really interesting.
Yeah, we can't expect ourselves to not be faced with it.
Yeah, it's natural, man. Everything, the suffering, all that you've got in you, if you can truly understand how natural that is.
But what is your process with it? I think that's the key question, is how do you relate to it? Because if you're constantly dismissing it, pushing it away, pretending like it's not there, that's I think that's really damaging. Versus like, part of my reframe in this is understanding, okay, rather than seeing the light and the dark as equal, I've actually started to see that I need to consciously, because it's almost passive, that's almost a passive, like the suffering and the darkness is equal.
Yeah,
to the light.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't feel passive to me.
Yeah, but this has just been my process, but rather like looking at the suffering and actually being like, how can I bring this into light? How can I consciously bring this into light, be honest with it, be vulnerable with it, rather than.
And that's what I mean in that process is a naturalistic. I know it's just a boring word, but it's so natural. Yeah.
That's
but
right.
I get what you're saying in that, bringing the process into awareness.
Yeah, well, actually, like, I think favoring truth, and not just allowing the shadow to be like, oh, well, it's normal for us to have a shadow. I'm just going to desensitize myself to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to like, and I think that's what a lot of people do. They just,
in the spiritual world that we're used to be, or I used to be connected to, like everyone's telling you to just do your shadow work. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, man.
But then I think glorifying it, like I think in a lot of those communities, like it's glorified. I don't agree with that either. I think it takes, rather than being like loose with it, I think it takes discipline and self-control and like effort, and
because these things bring freedom,
Yes,
discipline,
exactly. That's
structure.
yeah, I've really changed my mind on a lot of, I think, my previous conceptions around, well, it's all love. And
Yeah.
like, yes, but it's at the same time, no, you know, we need to bring it into love. We've got to actually bring that to light and bring it into love. And it requires strong, discipline. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I really learned that the last 2 years. I was like, if my brain has shrunk and I'm in fear and unsafe zone all the time, what am I going to need to do to make myself feel safe? And so everything for quite a while there was methodically structured, which we giggle about my spreadsheet, but I needed to do that. And then slowly it became so unconscious I could let go. But there are so many processes in place that keep my shame in a place of naturalistic. And then when I'm not, like I had it the other night, I notice it when I get like, that's why I don't want to do any more work and give to others too much right now, because I know I can just get so quickly overwhelmed and judge myself that I then go down in a spiral. But I have really wonderful, disciplined practices to bring me back to truth. What is it? Myself, connected.
Yeah, the truth. I think it's a matter of coming back to not trying to dress it up, not trying to make it something it's not. Like squirm away. Just be.
No one even knows that I'm going through this. Once upon a time, I would have done a video every day. Every day, I would have done a video and told you the process I'm going through. These days, I just laugh and go, "Who cares?"
Yeah,
I don't care. No one cares what I'm doing.
Sacredness of space with soul is actually crucial. You know, I think as we journey through these times, we need to have first and foremost a relationship with ourselves before we, I think the danger of putting ourselves out there whilst we don't have that relationship with self is our vulnerability and our process is constantly being defined by other people, which takes away our choice of how do I want this to define me. Like you can choose that. You be under your own conviction in that way, not the conviction of other people who don't necessarily have the love in their hearts for you. And I think all of us deserve an opportunity to tell the world who we are rather than being defined by the world.
One thing I noticed, which always makes people feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable, but racism is pretty awkward and uncomfortable, is I have spent a lot of my last maybe year in particular noticing how much I would diminish myself because I'm brown.
Wow.
That I wouldn't speak up in front of these rich upper echelon families that used to fund me, and because their money is more important than me. And I think about all these sort of microaggressions of walking into rooms where there's funders everywhere and I'm the only brown person, and people go, "Oh, you're not that brown," or it doesn't really matter. And I'm like, yeah, but you say that from a place of you haven't grown up with being aware of your color or being aware of your low socioeconomic background, and that says anything to you.
Right? If it's not in your awareness, then you're privileged. And
I don't even want to say the word privilege because I feel like it always sends people on a back foot at the moment. But yes, 100%, it's the privilege. So I also think that people who are listening to this who have a disability, who've been labelled poor or come from a migrant family or ethnic or have had some form of disease or all the intersectional issues that are out there, LGBTQ, whatever it might be, I think you have to also, or not even, you don't have to do shit, but I know I had to spend time thinking about what was making me sometimes feel unsafe in a world that says you can just do whatever you want. And I'm like, well, no, you can't.
Well, yeah, it's both true. I think anything that's oversimplified is dangerous,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I've got a sincere fucking booty, rocket up my booty for diversity, inclusion, equity. And I hate the tokenism of the industry that I came from now, because I go, how could I be a better advocate for people from all walks of life? And anyone who's even watching this, it's just a process of self-reflection that we're going through right now, right? But I do think you need to throw in thinking about the multi-levels of how you can be represented in society, privileged or unprivileged, and how that contributes to your state of being. Anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that that's an important and powerful thought. I think an invitation for people to actually ask, again, like, where is there suffering in my life? Where is there no suffering in my life? And why is that? And who, like, where, if you've walked into an interview and you've been favored without even realizing because of how you look, for instance, and that's never been an issue for you, just like, imagine how would that be to actually have that be a barrier, that you need to work through, and consider that in how you relate to the people around you.
Yeah, I've really sort of taken a step back and thought more and more about like, psychology is based on a lot of dead old white men. And yet we read these books religiously, and these self-help people, and a lot of these people that I read or have read or follow, they don't represent what I grew up. And I think sometimes I'm trying to fit into this psychological process that is not meant for people like me. Like, that's what I really had time to reflect on. Now, does that disempower me? No, but the awareness of it makes me go, I just have to be careful that sometimes those processes aren't working for me because of my cultural background,
I think that's really powerful. Ask yourself, do the things that you're seeking actually bring you, what I hear in this is closer to a sense of wholeness and a sense of, like, self-understanding. And if it's putting you in more dissonance and confusion, then it's not actually bringing you closer to who you are. And don't continue to idolize and follow paths that are actually taking you away from who you are. I think that's incredibly important, incredibly.
Yeah, it feels important right now. That's what's unfinished. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
I feel like we need to do like 3 sequel episodes.
Dude, I don't even know what I said. There's a cool moment that Oprah talks about, that no matter who she had on her stage, whether it be Obama, Beyonce, whatever, all these incredible Nobel laureates, they would still get off stage and say, was that okay?
For sure.
So I hope somebody got something out of this.
These guys are getting so much out of this, and it's like, it's quite amazing and beautiful. You've definitely touched people in your sharing.
I just felt like when you said it, I feel like I just got a lot out of this from you, just thinking, that natural part of me to just share the shame and the sadness. I didn't even know that was going to come up today, but
I think that there's more. There's
such a natural conversation.
Yeah, I want to actually keep going. I'd love to do another episode and go more deeply into the process in a way that people can actually start applying to their own journeys. So let's do that. But let's break it down maybe into the key before we finish up. Because unfortunately, not that I'm glorifying busyness, have a meeting.
No way. We just went for 45 minutes. We
just went for an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh God. See?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
They'll be halfway through.
Was that including our time? Maybe. Yeah. No, it wasn't including our time. Anyway, time flies with you. That's the what is the number one, until we do another episode, which I truly do want to do. What is the number one thing people can start practicing in their own lives to move closer to what's truly going on for them and start to resolve what isn't finished inside of themselves? From your wisdom and what you've learned over the past couple of years.
it has to be something around your pain is your greatest teacher. And it was really painful. Like, no one will ever know your pain, but you can't compare your pain to my pain because it's yours. And I just think that we move away from pain when really we need to move towards it, because it really does bring you that sense of nature, a very much an acceptance of self. So I just feel like I want to encourage people, that are feeling pain. That's like, how sexy is that? To just want to look at your suffering, and you don't need to share it with everyone. It's just for you. You can journal about it, write about it, talk to your friends about it, but you don't need an audience with this one. Like, this is for your soul to witness you accepting yourself. And that's what I feel like the last year has been.
Amen, sister.
Bravest thing I've ever done is tap out. So thanks for being my return.
This is the first of many great things.
I just, this is what I love about these conversations is I just love you. I just, like, even the people, it's refreshing if you're this kind of human to connect in this way and hear and listen to each other, and you just do it so beautifully. I just wanted to say that.
I love this, and I'm so grateful for your sharing, babe. I'm proud of you, super, super proud of you.
That feels so nice. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, to everyone watching, thank you for watching. We're going to stop the live stream. Hey, family, if you loved this podcast and you want to stay connected to a tribe of heroes all around the world that are here to make the world a better place and act from their hero brain and act from a place of love, bringing their head and heart into cohesion, then I just want to invite you to jump in our Facebook group for free. Just search the Critical Mass Crew and you're going to find us there. We have tribe calls weekly, and these podcasts are actually streamed into that group. So we have an additional 20-minute Q&A with the guests every single week that is exclusive to people in the group. So you'll also find the link in the show notes. See you in there.